Our next speaker is Sardar Singh. Sardar Singh is an optometrist by profession and outside of examining the human eye, prescribing spectacles and fitting contact lenses, Sardar has an eye in the area of contemporary Sikh history, with emphasis on Sikh politics and diaspora Sikh activists. Sardar has previously given research at the embassy of 2019, 2020 and 2021, and has delivered history lectures to students at Aston, Keele, Cardiff, Queen Mary, University of Leicester, and most recently at the London School of Economics. Sardar is passionate about widening his own horizons and enjoys reading literature of all different genres. He enjoys visiting museums, art galleries, and wandering into the unknown. He has written poetic prose in the past, is a gym enthusiast, and enjoys recording nature's lights through a camera lens.
Tani Guru Pyare. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So before we do begin, if we can all perhaps shut our eyes for a few seconds, and then if we open up our eyes and if we centre a lens that we're now not at King's College, but we're actually in Shepherd's Bush. So today my title is The Walls Utter a Melodious Tune, tracing chapters of Sikh history through the lens of the Khalsa Jatha British Isles. Now the Khalsa Jatha British Isles is the first Gurdwara Sahib in central London, which was founded in 1908, for those who perhaps don't know or have not been there before. Now it is the oldest Gurdwara Sahib in the country and even in Europe. Now what do I mean by the walls utter a melodious tune? Well, when you go into the court of Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj, you generally hear Gurbani, if it's sung in rag, in the Kirtan form, or you'll hear it from the Granthi Singh, or if somebody's perhaps giving a translation and doing a particular discourse of the Gurbani, or a supplementary text relating to the Sikh paradigm. And so I've been going to that Gurdwara Sahib now for about a year, but when I've been entering the Darbar Sahib, the court of the King of Kings, perhaps the walls are perhaps giving me a secret and telling me what's been happening over time. And I wish to present some of my own personal findings and recollections relating to the Gurdwara Sahib to you all today. Now, just beginning Professor Pooran Singh, and you can read one of his particular quotes at the very, very top. And he's kind of giving you an insight into what's occurring in the Darbar Sahib, relating to that dazzling light, relating to the Guru, and what a disciple will kind of experience and feel. But he's also mentioning the idea of the human mind and that liberation of that human mind, which is achieved via the Guru, and perhaps by only the Guru himself. And even another quote relating in the past history of Sikh history, and looking at that spirit and that it will one day rise again, like it rose at the Battle of Jamkor, at the Battle of Multan, and many other battles in Sikh history. Now we have a photograph of a gentleman called Captain Amrinder Singh, who was perhaps a quite a dominant figure in Sikh politics and Punjab politics, and is still seen as sort of the Maharaja of the Sikh princely state, Patiala, which it once was, and actually a family member of his, Maharaja Gurpreet Singh, had actually sort of started the Gurdwara Sahib, and it was called the Maharaja Gurpreet Singh Dharamsala. And obviously he mentions how society would have been in that very, very small quote, which you can all read. Now, we do have two photographs of two individuals who are closely linked to my presentation. Some of you may know the gentleman on the far bottom, Gurpreet Singh Anand, who's the current president of the Khalsa Jatha. And we also have a photograph of a gentleman called Gyani Ratan Singh Shah, who was around in the 1940s and actually knew Shaheed Udham Singh quite well, and later on he actually organised the first kind of commemoration event for the martyrdom of Shaheed Udham Singh. And I actually found a poetry book of his at a Gurdwara Sahib in Bristol, And that's what I kind of mean, that we're tracing the chapters, we're finding our history, we're finding gaps which will make the picture complete. And obviously Gurpreet Singh's comment relating to my title, that melody perhaps is being heard, but only being heard by a few. And it's perhaps those few, even today, perhaps some of you will take something on board more than I would expect. And here's a photograph of me doing Jor Sahib and obviously the Nishaan Sahib outside the Gurdwara. Now before we actually enter sort of more of the history related to Shepherd's Bush, I do want to take you to two locations very, very nearby. And we have a gentleman by the name of Max McAuliffe, who, if you're into Sikh philosophy, you may have heard, and who's actually kind of translated Gurbani and the writings of the Gurus into English. And it's a very, very common name, who was very, very kind of an integral figure in the Sikh Sabha movement, the Reformation period, which occurred during the early 1900s. And he was actually from Britain and a very, very close friend of a gentleman by the name of Baikan Singh Nabha, who's written the Mahan Bush. Now, over at Sinclair Gardens was where he used to live in the early 1900s, not very, very far from the Khalsa Jatha. Now, when the Gurdwara Sahib was actually formed, it was actually the first buildings at 79 Sinclair Road, and you can see a photograph of me standing outside that particular Gurdwara Sahib. And then we also have a photograph of a role model of mine, Sardar Gurpreet, who was a very, very integral individual who lectured on Sikhi and brought many of the young pioneers who had come from India and brought them into the fold and taught them Sikh philosophy and the Sikh paradigm and the Sikh way of life. And here's a photograph of the modern day Gurdwara Sahib. Now, I kind of want to set the tone, and we'll kind of be going on a bit of a historical journey. Now, my dear friend Sardar Gurpreet Singh Singh had spoken about Master Dara Singh at quite some detail, and his role in the partition of the Punjab, and his role perhaps in the Gurdwara reform movement, and then later on related to the Punjabi Subha movement. Now, let's take you all down to 1849. So many will know that after Guru Gobind Singh Ji, Baba Banda Singh Bahadur had established the first Sikh Republic, and that kind of led to, later on, there were holocausts, and then once more, the Sikhs had managed to come back in their might and once more take repower and set themselves into a confederacy. But during Maharaja Ranjit Singh period, Maharaja Ranjit Singh had passed away in 1839, a lot of political turmoil in the 1840s, and then the subsequent annexation of the Punjab after two very, very large battles or wars, the first Anglo-Sikh War and the second Anglo-Sikh War, which featured Shyam Singh Attari and General Sher Singh Attari, General Chakra Singh Attari in the second. So I kind of just wanted to give you an idea that the Sikhs were the premier, the rulers of the Punjab, but then later on in 1849, this particular passage translated by Amardeep Singh Madra from a novel called Baba Tega Singh. And the book which I've pictured here is also written by Master Dara Singh, who was, besides a politician, he was a head teacher in Lialpur and a poet and also a novelist. And that just kind of gives you an idea of the surrender of the Sikh forces in 1849. Now, if we come now down to the early 1900s, so during that particular gap, there were many large reform movements, the Namdari movement, the Nilangari movement, and then later on came the Singh Sabha movement, a reformation period which looked to kind of reanalyze Sikh ideology and present it anew, defying perhaps groups such as the Arya Samaj, the Brahma Samaj, and many other kind of groups who were trying to bring their kind of religion to the very forefront. Now in my lectures I like to bring new personalities to the forefront, and hopefully today you'll find bits where perhaps you've not read before. So Gurdwara Rakabganj is a Gurdwara in Delhi. Now over the past week we've been remembering Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji and his martyrdom in Chandni Chowk in Delhi. And there are two very historic Gurdwara Sahibs, Gurdwara Sisganj and the Rakabganj. Now, during the British Raj period, the British were kind of stationed in Calcutta, but later on they had wished to move down to Delhi. And they had kind of chosen a location very, very near to the Gurdwara Sahib itself. And one of the architects had wished to kind of knock down the wall of the Gurdwara Sahib, which then later had led to a kind of a huge uproar from the Singhs and the Sikhs, who were very, very disturbed at that particular happening. And Sardar Singh Kavishad, we do have a quotation from Harjot Oberoy's new book, which I would definitely recommend, and it's what he's written in 1920 in the kind of magazine titled The Akali. And the Akali meaning immortal, and then we have the Akali Dal, which was the premier Sikh political party under the wing of Master Dada Singh, who was perhaps the leader for many, many years, and perhaps somebody who I hold in high esteem for a reason why I'll be telling you very, very shortly. Now, what's the link from what's occurring in Delhi back to Shepherd's Bush? Now, from the quotation at the very, very top, you can see that the Khalsa Jatha had wished to they had sent a written deputation to the British government, telling them what's wrong, why it should not be occurring, and it kind of gives you an idea. And even if we look at the modern day, if we see something happening in Punjab relating to a Sikh, it comes onto Twitter, and by the end of the day, everybody in the diaspora will know. And so even today, I mean, we've had many, many different speakers here. We perhaps don't know what the after effect will be on people who weren't present, or what effect it may lead to. But it gives you an idea of how important the Gurdwara institution was. That, okay, look, a wall is being taken down, but Sardar Singh Kavishad is saying that it doesn't matter. Our Gurdwara, our Guru, is the most important entity in our life. And we see that from the Sakya Baba Deep Singh and Baba Gurbaksh Singh as well, who defended Darbar Sahib alongside Sanjay Singh Ji in 1984. Now, Sikhs migrated in large numbers, more contemporarily, but generally in the early 1900s as well. There was a large kind of change in sort of demographics and migration from the Punjab back to the States, Canada, and also to the United Kingdom. Now, from the particular map, as mentioned from a book written by Balaraj Purival, that many Sikhs were in the Owlgate area, whereas the Gurdwara Sahib was in Shepherd's Bush. But later on, in order to have a living, you need to be earning money. And a job opportunity came at a rubber factory, which is very, very close to Southall. And even for some of you today, I mean, if you've ever done that particular journey, though it's not very, very long from Shepherd's Bush, but if you're living in Owlgate and you're going down to Southall, it definitely takes a very, very long period. And that's why perhaps many Sikhs have migrated down to Southall, which led to the creation of the Shri Guru Singh Sabha Gurdwara on previously Havelock Road, but now Guru Nanak Road, and many other Gurdwara Sahibs in that particular area. Now, if we go linking back to Master Dada Singh, after he passed away in sort of the 1960s, a gentleman by the name of Sant Fateh Singh came along, and he perhaps steered the Akali Dal, the Sikh political party, in the province of East Punjab for quite a long period of time. Now, my dear friend Jaskinver spoke regarding the Azad Punjab, the Sikhistan model, and the subsequent partition of Punjab, which I won't speak much about, but obviously Sikhs were finding that they were very, very hard done by the events that Shri Nangana Sahib, Shri Banja Sahib perhaps had gone away from them. And even today in our Ardas, we would generally always ask for the Gurdwaras to be sort of returned back to perhaps the principal owners, the Sardars of the Sikh Band. Now, the photograph of Sant Fateh Singh can be seen in the top corner, and he's reading from Guru Granth Sahib Ji from 79 Sinclair Road, which I'd shown you on the map. Now, there are two particular figures in that particular photograph, which I'd like to point out. Now, the first on the far left is a gentleman by the name of Sardar Gurpreet Singh QC, a very, very intellectual man who's definitely kept the Sikh identity intact. And we have a little quotation from 1976. And he was also a member of an organisation called the Shri Nankana Sahib Foundation. Now, coming back to partition occurred, obviously Nankana Sahib and all these principalities where Sikhs were in a very, very large number. They had perhaps gone to Pakistan and were perhaps out of the hands of the Khalsa Panth. And so in the 1970s, the keys were actually given back to a deputation of Sikhs in 1970, which I mentioned in a previous lecture anyway. But the Nankana Sahib Foundation was led by a gentleman by the name of Sardar Singh Anand, who in 1981 very famously said that Sikhs are a nation. Okay, and just coming back now to that Nankana Sahib Foundation. Now, in the 1980s, we know a political turmoil had kind of engulfed the Punjab, and that many Sikhs had realised that their only means of achieving what they wish is from an independent Sikh state. And the Shri Nankana Sahib Foundation had also sort of sponsored Sikh hijackers. And now that brings me to a gentleman by the name of Amar Shahid Bhai Manjeet Singh Babbar. Now, I feel it is very, very important that the history from a Sikh point of view includes the martyrdoms and the sacrifices made by Sikhs post-1984. And he was a guerrilla sort of warrior. Now, I met a family member back in 2019, and you can see me and Bhai Manjeet Singh, the photograph at the very, very far end. Now, Bhai Manjeet Singh was part of a guerrilla movement, a guerrilla forward by the name of Babbar Khalsa. And even in that particular photograph, he's wearing a jacket of the International Sikh Youth Federation, which succeeded the Sikh Students Federation here in Britain. And one quick little anecdote which I'd like to obviously mention, that Bhai Sahab in the photograph had told Bhai Manjeet Singh that you should now come over back, well, you should come to Britain, that what's happening in the Punjab, it's getting out of control. But what Bhai Sahab had replied to him and said, no, how can I leave the Maidan-e-Jang, how can I leave the battle and run away to Britain? And just to kind of give you an idea of that Sikh spirit that they had, that whatever happens, now that I've made a pass to my Guru, I will not backtrack. And we can see that continuously throughout Sikh history, and even to the present day. Now, coming down to a gentleman by the name of Bhai Devinder Singh Parmar. Now, he was actually sent over to Britain by Master Dara Singh in 1955 during the beginning of the Punjabi Subha movement. Now, the Punjabi Subha movement was a movement to kind of bring in the idea of a Punjabi-speaking state into that particular kind of area. The Punjab was very, very big. And then later, during the foundation of the Punjabi Subha in the late 60s, you have Himachal Pradesh and you have Haryana. But Sikhs had to struggle for a very, very long period of time. Now, the gentleman here is seen as the founder of the Khalistan movement here in the United Kingdom. And he, from the 1950s, he had drawn up a map, which I've shared in a different lecture. But he was a very, very kind of fundamental Sikh figure in sort of the United Kingdom, and was in a gully. And there's a photograph of him kind of doing namaskar to a gentleman by the name of Surjit Singh Johal, a president of the Shri Guru Singh Sabha Gurdwara in Southall. And there's a photograph of him actually riding a scooter sort of near 10 Downing Street. And during that particular period, that the British government had enforced that you have to wear a helmet regardless of who you are. And coming back to that delay, that kind of fearlessness, that I bow down to my Guru, I do not bow down to any government, and nor will I ever. And that same doctrine is seen by Sanjay Singh Ji and the Kharku Singhs, freedom fighters of the late 1980s. And so we mentioned Ganga Singh Dhillon, and also a gentleman by the name of Sardar Gurpreet Singh, who was also kind of involved in the Nankana Sahib Foundation. Now, he lived in Surrey. Now, coming back down to what Jaskandar Singh mentioned regarding the Sikh idea of what will occur when the British leave, and bringing in kind of an idea of the Sikh Students Federation once more. We're all students here today anyway. And what the Sikh Students Federation wished to do was to inspire a political consciousness in the young Naujawan, the youngsters, so that they could steer the Panth in the correct way. And here's a quick anecdote relating to this meeting when he met Sardar Patel, who was very, very influential in the Indian state government post-partition. And it kind of shows you to what extent they were willing to give their role to the Panth once more. Now, coming down to the 1980s, and we are sort of coming to the end of my lecture anyway. Now, nowadays on PTC Punjabi, you can hear live, well, maybe not live in the United Kingdom, but you'll hear that relay of Gurbani coming from Talwaars Sahib Straits. But back in the 1970s, 60s, and sort of the 80s, that was not happening. And the Sikhs in the United Kingdom, in London, had decided that we need to make sure that's happening. People in the United Kingdom, in the diaspora, they want to hear Gurbani from Talwaars Sahib. And the first kind of demonstration occurred in 1982. And that photograph is from Hyde Park. And the gentleman in the blue dastard over to here was a former finance minister of the Punjab by the name of Dr. Gurpreet Singh Anand, who later, alongside Navinda Singh Parmar, who we spoke about in the previous photograph, had spearheaded the Khalistan movement and were two very, very large figures here in the United Kingdom and abroad. And even coming back down to Shepherd's Bush, Darshan Singh Tatla, late Tatla Sahib, in his book, he mentions that meetings were held at the Shepherd's Bush Gurdwara, and that they did wish to bring Sanjana Singh to Britain. What a spectacle that would have been indeed. Coming down to 1984, as I mentioned at the very beginning, whatever is happening in the Punjab, social media will pick it up and it's relayed around the whole world. Fair enough, in the 1980s we didn't have social media, but still newspapers would pick up information and they would distribute it. And that's from the times of Indira Gandhi and the assault on Talwaars Sahib. Now, coming back from the very beginning where we spoke about the Garbganj Gurdwara and the political sentiments which occurred there, that the Sikhs in the UK were ready to obviously send their deputation and write that sort of letter. And similarly, in 1985, Shepherd's Bush perhaps became an epicentre of Sikh politics, and these particular photographs are perhaps from the same occasion, really, from the old Talwaars Sahib at Shepherd's Bush. Now, we spoke about Dr. Gurpreet Singh Anand in the previous photograph. He is seen over on the far left, and next to him we have a gentleman, a very, very famous Kirtanee by the name of Baisava Singh Lully from Gravesend, who many of you may know. And he was part of a government in exile that the Sikhs in the United Kingdom and abroad had formally stated that the Sikhs will now strive for independence from the Republic of India. And we have a photograph of the front, and even a view of the Sangat as well, and another photograph on the far right. Now, coming over to the photograph on the far left, we do have a former President of the Republic of Ecuador, Dr. Monroy, who actually gave a very, very large speech and was seen as a big dignitary, which definitely made a lot of noises around the world. And here's a kind of a resolution, a statement which was kind of sent around the whole world, mentioning what the convention had recognised and what they wished to kind of put forward. Okay, and just moving on. Now, 1985, so the photographs which you spoke about before were from 1985 as well, and so are the two photographs on the far left and the far right. And once more we have Dr. Chauhan, we have a gentleman by the name of Sardar Gurpreet Singh, who was the Prime Minister of the Republic of Khalistan government in exile. But the gentleman I want to pick out is on the far left, by the name of Jatadar Balbir Singh Nijjar. Now, I've been frequently attending the Khalsa Jatha, and I found this particular pamphlet written by him. And it's quite remarkable that such a document is perhaps still there, and history is all around you, and it's perhaps the walls which will speak to you, maybe only, but I feel that perhaps I'm a custodian of history, and I wish to keep that intact. Now, just to sort of finish off, the gentleman on the top left is a gentleman by the name of Sardar Gurpreet and there's a recent book by the name of The Flying Sikh. Now, coming back down to Jaswanwar again, who spoke relating to the Sikh model prior to partition. Now, one particular meeting which obviously Hardeep Singh Malik writes in his autobiography relates to a meeting of himself, Maharaja Sahib, Gyani Kartar Singh, a leader of the Akali Dal alongside Master Tala Singh, and Muhammad Jinnah. And that's where Muhammad Jinnah had said that I'm willing to offer the Sikhs whatever you wish. You tell me what you want, and I will fulfill. And later on, he played a very, very large role in sort of Sikh philosophy, and definitely somebody to maybe look as a role model. And that particular photograph is from the Punjab restaurant in Covent Gardens. Now coming over to a gentleman by the name of Dr. Veer Singh, who we've been marking 150 years of. He was a very, very influential figure in the Singh Sabha movement. A very, very educated individual, a professional, just a little quotation to a book that I was kind of reading by Henry James. He was definitely a novelist which we should all perhaps be reading. And he's relating to the idea of a flower. And if we pluck that flower, we're uprooting that flower. And then if we perhaps look at in our own state of mind, where perhaps the Gurus were in the Punjab, and we're perhaps here, torn away from our roots to some extent, and perhaps we're adopting a different set of roots, a set of roots which are being perhaps propagated onto us, and it's perhaps reworking our mind and our psyche, and to understand who we actually are. But I found that quote quite good to sort of finish on. I spent the morning at the Shri Guru Singh Sabha Gurdwara Library in the morning, and I was reading a book on Dr. Veer Singh, and very funnily enough, Sardar Gurpreet Singh had actually met Dr. Veer Singh many, many times, and were very, very well acquainted. And he wrote many, many great words relating to Dr. Veer Singh and how he was sort of a magician kind of figure, which I will definitely share at a later date. So, coming towards the end of my presentation, definitely I can speak for many, many hours on Sikh history. I mean, I first adopted the stage here in 2019, and sort of been giving lectures quite thoroughly afterwards. But I mean, the kind of bendy I would definitely sort of give is that we all have a role to play in the world. We all have a role to play in society. And understanding who you are, understanding which lens we're putting in front of our eyes. Are we putting the correct lens that we need to be? Or are we kind of stuck in a frame of mind which is being put onto us? And do we need to break those chains once more? Sort of the final kind of message I would say. But no, I'm very, very grateful for all of you here today, the Nishaan team. And even just convert. I mean, I hope to see many, many more youngsters coming forward. I mean, there's no difference between me and you. I know nothing at all. I'm just sort of giving you a snapshot. But we are a collective, we are a bond, and we need to move forward collectively. So yes, I do have my own website where I've written quite extensively what I've been able to play. And hopefully one day I will become a novelist like Master Dara Singh, a poet like Dr. Veer Singh, and perhaps a revolutionary like Talwaars Singh Kabisha. Only time will tell. And I do have a YouTube page where hopefully at some point I have got this lecture recorded. I feel it's important that the message which is encircled here gets out. Otherwise, why are we living if we're not here to make a move? So I hope you enjoyed a very, very small snapshot of Central Gurdwara's history as I see it, what the walls are telling me, what my guru's telling me. I open up to questions and answers, and you're all free to close your eyes and imagine that scene and that you're back at KCL. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Sure, just read some.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa,
Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
I could have asked this question personally, but I think I thought it would be good to ask more than something. I love the fact you go after personality, you go after people. I just want to find out what's the reason. Give me loads of things, like for example, I love processing, I love seeing this stuff. I don't know, because every time I see you try to bring a new person, and after the new person there's a relationship with another person, and there's something happening already. And I think it's interesting.
Yeah.
My question is why?
Okay, right. Well, first of all, I mean, it's an open forum, open space, and no question is a wrong question. And it's great that we're all learning collectively, which is what it should be that Sunday. But for me, perhaps, I don't know, I mean, you're kind of looking at a role model during your time in the world. And okay, we have Gurbani, which is perhaps a very, very focal point for me, perhaps for all of us. But then you need to look at our elders and how have they adopted that Gurbani and what have they done in life. Now, I was speaking to a gentleman, Kirtanees Singh Anand, who you may know, a very, very learned Sikh scholar in the States, and who actually kind of played a role in Sardar Singh's magazine post Dr. Rajinder Singh's suspicious kind of killing during the Punjab turmoil period. And so yes, we have a khazana behind us. We have so much glory, so much has happened in Sikh history, and we should feel and we should have that pride. Like even today, I mean, I'm wearing a blue dastard, which is very, very significant for the Shromani Akali Dal and the Sardar Singh, and even the orange to signify sort of our independence and what we as a band need to do. But for me, it's my own kind of journey, where I will go to work, I will come home, obviously do what I need to do, and then pick up the books, and one book will send me to another book, and that will continue to go around. So during my university time, I mean, in my second year at uni, I mean, so I studied optometry, which I do enjoy, but there's something more to life than just simply, that's what I kind of mentioned about opening your mind, liberating your mind, as Professor Gordon Singh mentioned, and perhaps seeing one everywhere you go, and coming back down to the flowers, that we're all a flower here, and that we all are blossoming at perhaps different stages, but just having that lens that cool, that the world, that the King of Kings has made the world so beautiful, and he's made everybody here so beautiful. But coming back to personalities, I feel that even perhaps, as I mentioned, Baba Manjeet Singh and his Gurbani and his martyrdom, in an academic setting, you will hear very, very little relating to these individuals of the 1980s and 1990s. By Gurpreet Singh Anand, he was 23 years of age and he was martyred. He was from quite a rich family, rich background, well, not an aristocrat, but he was very, very well off. Why did he need to jump into the battlefield and fight for his people's rights? He didn't need to. But these are our role models, whether they be old, young, male, female. But for me, history is kind of like a jigsaw. You find a piece here, you find a piece there. Wherever you go, you'll find a piece, whichever book you read. And I kind of see life very, very romantically, that one piece will come and it may be very, very good and I'll take it on board. If not, I'll move on. But that's where it's how you're spending your free time. What are you doing in your free time? Are you trying to better yourself or are you not? But coming back to personalities, if I as a Sikh, as a descendant of sort of these individuals who've lived before, if I don't share their story, who will? You know? And that's, I think that's what we need to all be doing. We need to be documenting our own family history so it never perishes. So 100 years down the road, perhaps my grandchildren will know that Simarjit Singh stood up here and he spoke, and that's how it should be. We have too many Gurbani on our head for us to simply be walking around like we're normal people. We have too much. Well, that's my own kind of taking on that. But yeah, history is at our fingertips. It's up to us if we own it or if we let it dry away and discard it. So look, thank you for your time. I'm always here. Any questions at all, any conversation, I request it from anybody. We're Sangat, we're here to learn from one another. I did have 2 lectures previously for London students, and though I'm only 24, I do feel a lot older than students, but it's important that we're a collective, we have that yard, we have that common linkage, Gurbani, and that we all need to collectively progress, and hopefully one day the Nishaan Sahib will be flying all over the whole world, and the Helen Milad concept of how we ought to live, how the world should be, will be put into governance so we can obviously be true Sikhs of the Guru. Khalsa Jatha British Isles.